welcome back to Policing TV. Delighted here in central London to be joined for this second video by Simon Williams. Simon, thank you so much for your thoughts so far on evidence-based policing and the journey that you've been on from UK to Australia to New Zealand, back to Australia and beyond. So in this second video, I'd like us to pick up on the differences and maybe similarities that there are between those different jurisdictions, not just Australasia and UK, but beyond that, because you've some experience beyond that through SEBP as well, the Society of Evidence-Based Policing. So differences.
Yeah, look, I think as you astutely put, Bernard, there are actually far more similarities in policing in westernised countries, at least, than there are differences. I mean, having moved from the UK to Australia and been a uniform cop there, you know, the biggest difference, goes without saying, is you end up being generally armed. So every incident that you attend, or cops in Australia attend, becomes an armed incident. That said, the problems that everyone's facing are very similar. So it doesn't matter whether you look at an operational level around the level of demand and family domestic sexual violence, for instance, and the rate that's increased in terms of reporting, which actually in one way you could say that's really good, because that's a clear indication that there's more trust and confidence in the system for people to report, which is brilliant. But it clearly puts an even bigger demand on an already stretched workforce. Or you could look at a more strategic thing like recruitment and retention, for instance. Those are similar wherever you go, really.
So some differences, yes. You touched on all Australian officers being armed in some way, but some core similarities there, whether it's recruitment, whether it's trust of communities, and an opportunity there, presumably, for different jurisdictions to learn more than they do one from another.
Absolutely. Look, across Commonwealth countries, the style and tone of policing is generally very similar. You know, take out the general armament in Australia for a second, and you know, Australian policing, police by consent. Police by consent in New Zealand, the same as England and Wales and wider UK. So when it comes to learning lessons from each other, the world is your oyster, I think. I think it's something that is delivered in part by ANSPAR, for instance. So that's the Australian New Zealand Police Advisory Agency, and they pull together network groups of officers at kind of mid-ranking or assistant commissioner level to share practice across the country, but also to bring in people from international jurisdictions to share their best practice as well. But ANSPAR is only a small advisory agency, and so when you compare ANSPAR to the College of Policing in England and Wales, for instance, who I think are 600 or 700 strong now, the big difference there actually is that they are home to a What Works centre. So what works in policing? So now we're back to evidence-based policing and the importance of that. So the What Works centre, run by the College of Policing, I think has made a massive difference to the delivery of policing. It's impacted and influenced professional practice, that of course is then used as the benchmark by HMIC, FRS here in England and Wales. Go back over to Australia and New Zealand. Actually, you've got some incredible bodies of knowledge in terms of both universities and larger police agencies who have undertaken quite a bit of research around what works. But I think there's a real opportunity actually to start cementing some of that knowledge and sharing that through an independent arm's length What Works centre for Australia and New Zealand, in the way that the college have become a home to one of the What Works centres here. Interestingly, we held the ANZ SEBP conference at the start of September. The evening dinner and the evening speech was held at the Long Room at the MCG cricket ground.
Melbourne, Melbourne Cricket Ground.
Yeah.
Melbourne Cricket Ground.
Famous for many. I'd like to say it's famous for many English victories over there, but I think
you might have alienated a significant proportion of our audience just there.
I think we're short of a few, and actually England are struggling against Pakistan at the moment. When I left the house this morning, I think they were 466 for 3 or something like that. So not going well. But back to Australia and New Zealand and the conference that we ran. We invited Andrew Lee, who's an MP over in Canberra. He came and spoke. If you want a book recommendation, by the way, he wrote a book called Randomistas, and that talks about the way that experimentation, randomised control trials around us all the time, and actually they're really important for impacting policy, whether it be health, education, justice, policing. It's a great book of stories, actually, so if you haven't read it, I highly recommend that. But actually Andrew Lee called for exactly the same thing. He's just stood up an Australian Centre for Evaluation in Canberra, which is a small body at the moment, but he said he would also like to see an institute for policing similar to a What Works Centre be stood up in Australia. So I think there's some cause for optimism there, and I hope that the Australian New Zealand Society of Evidence-Based Policing have got a big role to play in making that happen.
Well, it's a passion of Policing Insight and Policing TV to share, to facilitate the sharing of good and excellent practice wherever it develops in the world. And of course, it's a passion of the Society of Evidence-Based Policing as well. You mentioned the Australia-New Zealand Society. The UK Society recently held a similar event in Cambridge. There are other SEBPs, notably North America, and so already established, and there are others that are looking to establish SEBP equivalents in their own nation states. So there's a significant journey already that the SEBP has been on, and there's a significant journey ahead as well, is there not?
I think so, and if you look at the conference I just mentioned in Melbourne, we actually invited and brought together the leads for the 6 countries that have got a well-established SEBP, so America, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and most recently the Netherlands. I know Sweden are about to stand up their own Society of Evidence-Based Policing. The Danish police are looking at doing the same thing as well. I believe India and South Africa are looking at doing something similar. So there is a really growing network of police practitioners and professionals who want to come together to really understand what works. So there's a massive opportunity there to continue sharing I'm not going to call it best practice, because what we're talking about is what works. And obviously there is a scale of evidence, and not everything can or should be a randomised control trial. Far from it, actually, because officers' experience and the way that we learn in that way is just as important an element to be included in what works. It certainly became part of the New Zealand model, so it was a really healthy tension between, in New Zealand, what our strategic intent was around, being the safest country, so delivering safer homes, safer roads and safer communities, with the evidence, the best available evidence of what works both in New Zealand and globally, and our officers' experience. You can't deliver policing excellence without your people. So I guess that leads into one of the reasons why the societies are so important, and that global MOU I was just about to talk about, went off on a tangent there, but we actually signed a global MOU around the way that we would start to operate together. So that's been more collaborative, sharing papers, sharing findings, starting to develop educational programs. I'm actually meeting with Associate Professor Matt Bland from the University of Cambridge this afternoon. He's just become and appointed the first Chief Operating Officer of the UK SEBP. So we're going to sit down for a couple of hours this afternoon and talk about, okay, so what, now what? How do we really cement that global MOU? And before the end of the year, we want to meet as a global team again and really plan out 2025, 2026 and see what we can make happen.
Very exciting times for the Society of Evidence-Based Policing. Exciting times also for jurisdictions around the world getting more able to share good and excellent practice, with SEBP internationally being one mechanism, one way of sharing determined that Policing Insight on Policing TV complements the work of SEBP and those policing jurisdictions worldwide. Simon Williams, for the time being, thank you so much for that second video. We're going to find another suitable location here in central London and record one more video. Thank you very much.